Welcome to the second episode of 3-level series. Last time we went through some ground level explanation, beginner strategy, simplified things. Today we step up a notch. We go to more in-depth explanation of our strategies and different lines. Why do we certain things? Why do we don't do certain things? So a bit more advanced strategy. And then the next part will be more about adjusting to opponents using hard notes, color coding, and so on. So let's get into the action. As usual, we have one table of PLO Zoom, and hopefully we will get more action than on the previous attempts. I actually did a couple of recordings already, but was really running low on playable hands. So let's see if this is actually the fourth take on this video. So hopefully we will get more of those playable hands. Pocket kings, pretty much, we will open all pocket kings from the button if it's unopened. But when we face an open and it's min open, we would still play most of the kings. But King 7 deuce is such a crappy one. I mean, if it was suited, then I would call them in open if it was suited to king. But 7 high suit is such a big downgrade from king high suit. So just going to fold that one. In general, from the button versus late position open, we call most single suited kings, but we fold the crappiest non-king suited. Like King 7 deuce suited to king is more closer, but not suited to king, definitely open. King 9 4, 7 3, 8 deuce, King 5 deuce, not suited to king. Those are all folds from the button. But yeah, versus min open, we could definitely call wider. So that one makes it a bit tougher decision. I decide to follow my rule of thumb. If in doubt, just fold pre-flop. Here we 3-bet double suited kings with ace. And it's a situation where solver would just want to get it in with often. Because from the small blind versus under the gun, then double suited ace king is just raise. And I would say 3-bet is good, but on small stakes 4-bet is 99% aces if you don't have reads on opponents. So readers always consider 4-bet as aces, and versus aces we have to fold ace king double suited. So unlucky, first real premium hand, and we face a 4-bet, but it happens. If he has normal under the gun open that people have like 20%, then he will have like 1 out of 16 times or so. 1 out of 17. Actually 1 out of 15 if I'm correct. He will have pocket aces when we have 1 ace in our hand. So if you wonder, it's very unlikely that they have aces when we have ace blocker. It's true, but then 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15 times he will have those. And of course, he might be 4-betting something else, but the hands that insta 4-bet are often ace kings, or he's just 4-betting any double suited rundown. But once you see people do quick 4-bets with rundowns, you can make a note, and then it's easy to adjust. But we don't have that note, so read less, consider it aces, and in the long run you will do good. And then we wait. The funny thing is that on average you should have a playable hand 1 or 4 times. But now I played over an hour for these videos and been struggling with playable hands. I hope it turns, because making a video of me folding for half an hour to an hour, that's pretty boring. And then we have one of these situations that often generate problems for people. Small blind versus big blind. The general rule of thumb is that we should call here with really wide range of hands. And pretty much, as a rule of thumb, all pocket pairs that are above 7 is mostly a call. Because we have position, we can 1BB discount. I mean, versus some players, it's profitable to play even without looking at cards. Now he checks flop, checks turn. We have the cutter. So I'm going to, we actually have a double cutter. So I'm going to bet the overpair to protect my hand. If he raises, we have a pretty easy fold. But he will have a lot of naked flush draw over cards. And if he has overpair, then we have 10 outs to straight or full house. So even when he calls, we still have decent equity. So it's pretty easy bet on the turn. And then we just fold to an open. Double suited kings. Versus the middle position, we would 3-bet the ones with ace and really connected king, queen, queen, jack type of hands. And these disconnected double suited kings, they work fairly well with just calling. Seeing the flop, hand is so strong that even if it's multi-way pot, this is really good multi-way pot hand. And then we hit the top set, and the question is, do we want to raise or not? And now we know that opponent is aggressive. There aren't that many cards that we should worry on the turn. Of course, if it's ace, 3, 5, 6, it completes a straight, but his range is so much wider. And now we want to bet the turn, and I'm actually going to use pot sizing because we are very polarized here. We have strong made hands and then some semi-bluffs. And turn is a jack that opens the flush draw, which means although the turn is a blank, it opens a lot of draws. After that jack, then there aren't that many blank turns. 7 and 8 of non-hearts are only blank rivers. So we need to bet the turn, and we need to bet big to protect the hand. Then we have cutoff versus button, cutoff versus, I'm sorry, middle position versus early position, and what we have is the single suited bad kings. This is a whole different situation than if we were on the cutoff or button on the late positions. So there we only want to call with really connected suited kings and preferably suited to the king. So it's good to understand what's the difference is between early positions, under kind of middle position, and late positions, which is cutoff and button. Once again, aggro donks half a pot. We have the hand locked. If we raise, it's pretty obvious what we have. So when I call, I will have some weak ace-x hands. And he checks. Now the thing is, if he was bluffing the flop, he's not bluffing the river most likely. That's one bet and give up. But in case he does have a 5, ace, or kings, we definitely need to bet. And we don't need to bet big, because we have the hand locked. And he was just bluffing with total air. Donking ace 5 below flop and giving up. It's weird strategy. I wouldn't advise donking ace high flops to pre-flop raisers. Then we have open and mean 3-bet. And as a rule of thumb, we don't want to call 3-bets. The problem there is it's mean 3-bet. But if we call with that hand, that's a bit crappy hand. If we call and then the original raiser decides to go for 4-bet, we have to fold. So we're cold calling 3-bet to fold to 4-bet, and that's always a bad strategy. if you even consider about cold calling 3 bets, then it should be no-brainer calling 4 bets too. Nice queens. And senior suited, once again, good rule of thumb, if it's connected, and queen 9-8 is connected with jack 10, we pick up the wrap. And then we hit overpair and backdoor straight draws. And what do we know? Opponent is a rec, shorty SPR 10. Good spot to check. Because if we bet and get raised, it sucks. Now he puts, we have overpair and wrap, pretty easy check here. Easy call. And we make the second nuts, we have blockers to the nuts, so let's see what happens. And I'm actually going fairly big because we're very polarized to blocker, bluff, or straight here. If he raises, it's really awkward situation with the stack sizes. With the blockers, it creates a problem where strategy-wise we shouldn't fold. Reality-wise, would he ever raise anything but the nut straight? But we need to value bet their second nuts with blockers to the nuts. One other option is to go really small and hope he is just can't fold to pair type of hand. And then his raising range might have more bluffs, so inside when the flop is rainbow, which means we have way less bluffs. I'm actually going to open the hand on the replayer and explain about it. Afterwards, when the flop is rainbow, it means that, well, now we do have some missed flush draws. Like try queens with hearts. Versus a good player, I would like the bigger sizing. But opponent is not reloading. That's often an indication of not super strong player. When he bets the turn, he might have jack 5, jack 4 type of hands. 10-5. But those are the hands we want to get value from. Well, we are blocking the straight draw, so it's more likely either he has pure bluff or he has some kind of weak made hand. So option is to bet 1/3, 150 here, and hope he calls and can help himself. But it's a spot where it's easy to justify big sizing and small sizing, and I'm quite sure that in the long run the EV is close to the same. I mean, with small sizing you get calls way more often, but with big sizing you win more when opponent doesn't believe that you have the straight. And what I've seen on the smaller stakes, people most of the time they call too wide instead of folding too much on the river. Try jacks on the big blind. Really close one. If it was pot size open, could even fold, but now for 1 BB, we can set mine. Definitely worth it. And we hit over pair with flush draw and cutter. If we were only versus damage, I would bet the turn. Just to protect the hand. Now half a pot with the flush draw and cutter. Over pair. Can't really fold. And then we would have blockers to jack 8, but my advice is not to use it, because if he has the 9 high straight, he's not folding it. And if he's a good player, he would realize we don't have a lot of Jack 8 hands when we call there. It's like Jack 8 with the flush draw. Jack 8 with the flush draw is the option that we could have the Jack 8. So from early position, Queen, Jack deuce. It's around, once again, for queens, it has to be very connected. Especially single suited. And then the wave is on. 65-5. Kind of player that from blind versus blind, we want to talk about more probably on the next episode, how to adjust versus those players. Should we add a limping range versus them? And I hope we get some paired boards. Because those paired and monotone boards are the ones where, when we go from simplified beginner strategy to more advanced concepts, those are the flops that start to, or where we start to change our strategy a lot. 65-8, I will make a tight fold. Those are quite problematic hands out of position. Of course, when you hit really strong on the flop, it's easy, but you will often hit mediocre hits, and out of position, even with strong hands, it's really hard to get value. So my advice is, on the small blind, play those small hands very cautiously. Then we have suited kings with not that heavily connected hands, and opponent is 66-6, which means he's opening with really wide, tight range. If he was more active versus 50 BP short, we could even 3-bet here. But now when he's opening with tight range, we want to see the flop. If we had ace, king, king, 9, we could go for 3-bet for sure with the ace blocker. And now he does that mean betting. Often a good way to approach mean bets is consider it as a check. So if he mean bets, if you would check, if he checks, you call. If you would bet, if he checks, you can raise. And are we good? No, we are not. He has aces. So he had pocket aces. That's a bad hand. Hand is bad. The only way we would put money in the pot is if small blind opens, or min opposition decides to min open. So we have to pay 1 PP in the pot, and a very close call. The hand has some potential, and now when the opponent is very bad looking, 70-30, but not very aggressive on the flop. It's like plays a lot of hands, and post flop seems to play pretty straightforward. The reason why I bet turn is to protect versus flush draws and overcards. And too bad both of those completes on the river. He definitely has overpairs in his range, but when he checks the flop, I think he also has a lot of other things in his range than overpairs. And I'm much happier to bet half a pot than check call half a pot. And then we wait. Queen 5-5 versus button open. One of those hands where people often think that, okay, I have suited king queen, I have 5. It's very close, and it's right at threshold. Should we call or not? I think once again, unless opponent is someone I can exploit post flop, just stick to the tight approach, and on marginal situations just fold it. I'm quite sure that's one of those hands where solver might call or not, depending on the settings of the simulations, but it's very break even in the best case scenario. I mean, it's suited to the king, but it's suited to the queen, so having suited connectors is bad. If it was suited to king and 5, the hand would be just a slightly better, would be a bit easier to make the call pre-flop. And I'm going to mark players as we play here. We're going to talk about more using color codes on the next video. That's actually close. What I was looking on the HUD was I have how often he folds big blind to small blind open. So if that number is high, then we can open a bit more because we have more fold equity. And his number was 20, which is probably 1 out of 5, but shows that he is not overfolding big blinds, and our hand was very marginal. A kind of hand that if he folds, we open; if he opens, we fold. With suited jack, we don't want to call pre-flop. And then we hit the middle pair. We have the ace of club blocker, which is the reason why I'm betting, because I'm going to barrel all the club turns, and he finds a pot size raise. We have the wrap, which gives us 13 outs, and we need some implied odds. And the SPR is going to be 1, so he's not folding a set if we hit our wrap. So it's going to be a close one. I think we can call. And now the thing is, with 13 outs, we have around 28% equity. We need 33. That $1 implied odds is not enough. We have to fold the turn. But the flop call is close one. But when we call the flop, we definitely have implied odds. He is not folding the turn on SPR1 with the set, which he probably should. But on the turn, we have 0 implied odds, except the $1 that's in his stack. So it's not enough. So it's just pot odds. We have the ace of clubs, which means that his raising range is mostly going to be sets. Opening jacks, getting 3 calls and missing the flop. There's nothing we can do here, except hope for a jack or 7 on the river if we want to win this one. But we don't even see the river. Also, I'm going to sit out because this is actually an interesting hand. It's also a question, do we want to bet the flop? And as I said, I have the ace of clubs, which means that we have a bit more fold equity. And if he calls, then we can barrel all the club turns and just have a nice fold equity versus queen X hands, kings and so on. And without the ace of clubs, it's a spot where I would most likely check call. If I had ace king queen jack, we could bet get it in or even check raise depending on I want to do. But just with the middle pair and the wrap, normally I wouldn't bet out of position, but with the ace of clubs, I think it's very justified to make the bet because we can continue bluffing quite many turns that we miss. And once he raises, his range is very set heavy, queen queen, so we play accordingly. And then we wait for playable hands. Pocket jacks from cutoff. Once again, single suited. The earlier we are, the more connected it has to be, and more we go towards button, the more looser it can be. And jack 5-7, we would open from the button, but from the cutoff, it's not connected enough. And with 3 spades, even hurts the hand, so it's almost like a try pocket pair, and we don't want to play try pocket pairs until unless they're aces or kings. But often you see people playing all queens, jacks, tens, no matter what the side cards are. Da-da-da. Our situation where we would play this rainbow hand is mostly if small blind opens, we would call. But if anyone else opens, we fold unless it's a min open. Everyone folds, which is super weird on small stakes. 4, 5, 6, 9. It's one of those that very close. Now the button is tight. We will talk more about the next video, but I open because button is a bit tight. There's a higher chance he folds. And even versus normal players, it's very close to folding or calling. And then we face a 3-bet. In position we call. Now the hand plays itself. If we hit the flop, the money goes in. And it's kind of medium hit. It's pair and cutter with backdoor flush draw. There's a couple of problems. One, he's very wide, so we don't know what he has. But when he pots, there's really high chance he has the hearts when we have single. And there's a third player. If it was rainbow, I would stack off if we had hearts. And there's set and a flush draw, and wow. He is hitting pretty strong, and he has king high flush draw. So we weren't in good shape. And made a correct fold with the pair and cutter. Also debatable should we call pre-flop, but we have position on 2 people. So in position, suited, double suited, even disconnect and rundown would be quite tight. And just folding on the small blind. Ace king 4-5 would be way better if it was suited to ace and king. But I'm going to isolate the under the gun limper, although he's very tight. It's a weird limp from 8 and 8. And we hit 2 overcards with the flush draw. Now it's a good spot to bet half a pot because we have all the flush blockers. Most likely versus a tight one would bet even without the flush. And now on the turn we have open ender, and I'm just going to go big. And what I'm trying to make him is to fold a queen X or try overpair. And he decides to call, which is not a good thing. So we have a lot of outs if he has a queen X or 6X. And he had a 6X this time, which is very unlikely on his limping range. But versus 6X, we still have pretty nice equity with open ender and 2 flush draws. I would say 40% or so, if I estimate correctly. Well, what we really want him to is to fold a queen X. We're actually small favorites, like I would estimate 55-45 depending on his side cards. Might be flipping. So if he folds 50% equity, it's great for us. Ace king then, and we have the blockers. And versus this player, it would work. And here we have someone who doesn't fold that much. So now the thing is that either we just check or we go for 3-street bluff. And we actually have a flush draw and cutter, which is even better. If he calls, we still have equity. And then on the river, let's go for small bet fold. I don't think he raises without the full house, because we have the nut flush and we're blocking the nut flush. To raise a king high flush would be weird here. He definitely has, when he calls the turn, either he has the flush draw with weak hand or he has a set Jack 9-10 type of hand. And when he folds the river, it's kind of weird. 8-9-10 is one of the hands that, but I don't think he should call a pot size turn. Anyway, so let's before we go to that, and here's an option where we can actually check raise the flop. And on the turn we have the flush draw and the cutter, and now he goes for really weird check back flop min raise turn. But our decision is easy. We have the pair cutter and flush draw. It's an easy call. And then let's check call the river. And now I'm kind of curious to see what in the world could he have. And I can't explain what he was thinking. Check back flop min raise turn with ace of diamond blocker and then not using it on the river. It just doesn't make any sense to raise turn. But it was so quick that I think it might be a misclick. But he shouldn't even, well, he might probably close the turn. Might be a misclick. But the reason why I open replay is this hand, because now when we talk about river strategy, should we value bet, should we bluff catch? It's always based on opponent's range. And in simple strategy, when we are beginners, like in the last video, the idea is that we don't go too deep into what's our opponent range, because when we start to define our opponent's range and play versus that range, it's considered more advanced. So then we are not beginners anymore. We start to understand about poker and PLO. And everything we do post-flop is based on opponent's range. So on the flop, the decision is, are we going to make the run with our blockers or not? And the reason why I decided is we're blocking of course, we're blocking the straight with tens, and the board is rainbow, which means that opponent cannot call with naked flush draw, which means that it drops like 1/5 from his normal call range. If this was suited to Jack 9 of spades, and we bet, we wouldn't have a lot of fold equity, because he would call with flush draws. Now, when he can call with flush draws, because there isn't any on the flop, we have way higher fold equity, which is very good for bluffing. Another good thing is we have the backdoor flush draw, and we have the cutter with the queen. So queen gives us the nuts. So it's nice to bluff with 10% equity to make the nuts in case he calls, or the backdoor flush draw, which we had here. And normally on three-way pots, wouldn't do a lot of big bluffs, but big blind is really tight, so he's not doing any crazy stuff. And sizing is half a pot, rainbow, straight board. Also half a pot is good here because then it keeps the SPR higher, which means that now when he calls, and now we bet the turn, we threaten to make a big $15 bet on the river. So we have leverage with this bet, or we should have leverage with the bet. Because if he, let's say he has a Jack 9, and he's like, okay, if I call that, he probably fires the river. Can I call the river with Jack 9? But if he has like $10 in his stack, he could just shove Jack 9. There's no leverage. Now, the funny thing is here, he calls the flop, which means he connects with it somehow. Could be wide range. But when he calls a pot size bet turn, it should be a hand that has equity versus the straight I'm representing. And when he calls, the hands that will have equity versus straight to call pot size bet is sets with something. Just a try set, he probably shouldn't even call here. But yeah, sets will have often equity, or people don't fold sets. But if he has two pairs, he needs to have something else with it, which is either open-ender or flush draw. He shouldn't have naked flush draws, because he has something with the flop. So, Jack 10 with clubs, 10-9-8, maybe, I don't know, 10-7, scared to raise, that actually makes sense. 10-7 would play this way, we're blocking those. And then club comes and the board pairs, which means that the hands that miss the board completely, that don't have a full house, don't have a flush, would be 10-7, 8-9-10, and that's pretty much it. Queen, 8-9. Shouldn't call the turn in my opinion. So then I'm quite surprised that he phones. Now it's our sizing. And if this river wouldn't pair the board, then we could actually go for check raise. Because if the river is, let's say, 5 of clubs, then either he has a really weak made hand, like 8-9 or just a jack, or a flush. And if we check, he might go to value bet the flush, we check raise bet value, or he might turn his Jack 10 into a bluff. But now when he pairs the board, the problem is that he's not value betting any of his flushes. If he has a queen high flush, he's not betting it when the board pairs. So that's why I bet small to get value from the flushes. And if he raises when we have the nut flush, I think he always has the full house. Of course, when we bet the flop and pot the turn, now the question is, could he turn some hands into a bluff? And strategy-wise, if we would play with really good players, then like Jack 10 would be a nice hand to turn into a bluff, because I don't have full houses in my range. I mean, yeah, one of the hands that I would have full house is a hand like Jack with clubs. But if he has one jack in his hand, we can't have jacks. So it's definitely a situation when we bet small, he could turn some trips into a bluff. But at PLO 25, I haven't seen that. I'm not sure if I've ever seen someone raising a jack here as a bluff. It might happen, but it's so rare that I think it's way better to just bet. And if he raises, let's say it's 90% full house, we can happily bet fold. But I'm surprised that he finds a fold. There are hands 10-7, 10-9-8, Queen 9-8 that shouldn't call the turn, but he did. Then definitely those are the hands that could find a fold on the river. But I think he should have a lot of flush draws in his range that we could bet the river. It's also an interesting hand that could be checked with poker choose, how often he has certain types on his range on the river, like should we check call or bet small ourselves. And well, can't find it, but I might check it later and then can answer, because it actually might be closer than I actually think. And I wouldn't actually be surprised if we should check call instead of betting. Of course, it depends on how aggressive the opponent is on the river, which now I don't recall, so it's more like the topic for the next video. How does the opponent's tendencies affect our strategy? Ace King Queen 5 on the small blind. Definitely open. And VPIP 74 finds a snap fold. That has to be a bad hand. Fold, fold, fold. Semi-playable hand. And it's 2.5 BB open. Versus normal open, this would be a fold. If that would be button open, I would call that small, but when it's for middle position, I'm just going to fold. Very close. Very close. Jacks at the 9, connected jacks, suited. It's a 4-card hand. Too bad we missed the flop quite heavily, and he is going to make a bet. No, he's not, which is, he thinks for a long time and doesn't make a bet, which is a bit suspicious. And let's see, if we hit the heart on the river, they give us free run out, and we don't. And he had aces that he checked back on the flop. Or checked on the flop. Someone might be wondering, why don't I bluff the river? There's no point. I don't think any aces, any king would fold. It's very often when you make a one bet on the river when flop and turn goes check check, unless the board like flush completes or something, people are just very sticky to call with any kind of made hand. If I would have any two pairs, I would, especially with the king, I would definitely bet for value. queens, connected ones, suited ones. Label. And we missed the flop completely. It's interesting one. Let's play this one and then discuss about it. Because there's a couple of interesting points on this one. All right. Opponent checks. Now, it's a board. If we bet, we have fold equity. So, like if we want to keep things simplified, play really straightforward, simple beginner strategy, we could bet this flop half a pot every single time, and it's going to be profitable in the long run. Now, if we take it a bit deeper, we have queens. If I didn't have pocket queens, let's say I would have queen, then 9-8, then I would bet, because we have fold equity. But with queens, the thing is, if he has a better hand, which is king or two pairs, or set, he's never folding. So we can make him fold a better hand. And if he doesn't, then we have the best hand. And we don't need that much protection. If he doesn't have king or two pairs, then the hands that might outdraw us is, of course, an ace, 3 outs, pocket pair, 2 outs, or the straight draw with 3, 5, 6, 8 coming on the board. And we have 1-8 blocker. So it's kind of close. Do we want to bet for protection, or do we just check to keep the pot smaller? We have a backdoor flush draw, we have a backdoor straight draw, 2 of them, and we have made hand value. So I decided to check back this hand, but it's kind of close. Do we want to bluff and protect? But if we have the best hand, he doesn't have that much equity. Of course, if he has 7x, he would have 10 outs. So it's definitely merit to make protection bet. On the turn, he stabs half a pot. Now, this happens very often when you check back the flop. People bet the turn very often. You might want to put that stat on your HUD or check it on the pop-outs if you have HUD. But it's quite common when you check back the flop, people stab the turn. And we have still queens, we have the flush draw. There's no way we can fold if we check the flop. If we check the flop and now fold the turn because he might have a king, then that's bad strategy. Then the flop and turn strategy is not coordinated. It's not connected. It's not consistent to fold the turn if we check the flop. But when we check the flop, we sort of represent quite weak hand. And river is a 6, and now comes another situation. He checks. Do we want to bet or not? And now I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about, do we bet or not, and why? And especially the question why is the most important one. If we bet, why do we bet? If we check, why do we don't bet? Thing is, we have made hand value. So once again, if the hand was queen then 9-8 with queen high, I would bet. Because we would have a... if we bet half a pot, we need 33% fold equity, which we have. But now when we have a made hand, the thing is, if he folds anything but straight 2 pairs, king or set, we would win that hand anyway. So the question is, if we bet, would he fold a better hand often enough? And to be honest, I don't think he folds any better hand. If he has a king jack, he might fold it. But opponent is marked, call happy. He might peel the river bet with any 2 pair, any king. Definitely not folding straights. So that's why I checked back. And he shows some complete pure bluffs. And you can see on the turn he has 0 blockers, even pocket tens, I mean, is that a value bet or bluff or what? Weird half a pot donk, but that's what people do. You check the flop, they stop the turn, and then on the river they give up. And that's why you should not fold the turn if you check the flop with the queens. And let's try to pick out one or two hands and then call it a day. Going to aim to make this 1 hour video. I think if it's longer, then it would be too long. But then half an hour with all the folds, then half an hour might be a bit too short. Then we have a playable hand, ace, king, queen, 8. The 8 is a bit dangler, it doesn't connect. I mean, with the queen, it would require jack then 9 on the board, and then king, queen makes the nuts, so... It's a deceiving hand. It looks like the 8 is connected with the queen, but actually it's not. It's like almost the same as having ace, king, queen, 7. Then we hit the top pair with a lot of backdoors. And now the question is, do we wanna bet or check? And I'm going to check. We know opponent is aggressive, but he has raised only 5% of times, which means raising for value. And we block the king here, so I'm happy to bet. And here goes the flop, which means he has hit it some way. The most common is to hit the king, but he lived, so his range can be really wide. And we have top pair and cutter. Now it should be pretty easy check back. And river completes the backdoor flush, but it also completes a straight and gives us top 2 pair. Once again, there's no point betting. He's not folding a flush. I don't think he's folding a straight. To be honest, I don't think he folds a slow played sets, 3s or 5s. So let's just check back and see if ace king is good enough. And it is. He had king then. He checked the turn and gave us a free river, which was good for us. But it's a weird hand to limp. Once again, it could be misclick. I have limped some hands myself when misclicking, so... Always, like, if a rep does a weird limp there, like he did, then don't make big notes based on one hand. We will talk about making notes on the next video, but as a spoiler, like that, if you want to make a note, then make a note that limped, blah blah blah, and a couple of question marks, like, is this really his strategy or was it a misclick? And then if you see that same thing happening more and more, then you might have a note. I call pre-flop double suited, disconnected, rundown, close one. And he pots the flop, and what we actually have here is just middle pair, cutter, and weak backdoor flush draws. It's not enough to call a pot size bet. So we have to fold. Ace 10 then 8. Now the question is, if under the gun would open, would we call a 3-bet? Because ace 10 tens are the ones that we're going to 3-bet some frequency of the time. So it's very close whether we want a 3-bet or not. My advice is with a strong hand, sometimes we want to call to make a multi-way pot, because then on these kind of flops, if someone has a flush, we stack him off 100% of times, and there's some merit on just calling with strong hands instead of 3-betting and making a heads-up pot. And I use their half a pot sizing on the monotone board where I actually have the nut flush to just get more value when we actually have a hand. And neither one of the opponent was really strong rep. I don't think they would pay attention to my sizings that much. And it's an imp pot. Yana Prima limps again from the previous hand, which is a bit weird. You have some notes. Some notes. Pocket nines. When there's open, we don't play the hand. Suited ace. And it's a min open. Oh man, it's versus full size open. Probably would just fold it. But versus almost at min open, we definitely want to see the flop with suited ace and some high cards. Quite close. Not going to make moves three-way. Let's see if we get one more interesting situation. But it seems that we don't. All right, rundown. Let's see the flop. And the flop is tricky. When someone donks on this board four ways, they should have a damn strong hand. Ace queen set with flush draw. So we're going to float. Let's just see what goes on. What is the hand he should donk like? Naked ace queen, definitely donkable hand here. Just donk and then bet big on the black river. If he has a queen, ace queen, that's horrible run out, and he has queen queen then. What? Now I have to criticize opponent's play. Let's play this hand first. Close. And we hit top two with a cutter. No diamond blockers. And there's code call where everyone is $40 deep, so let's just call and see how the hand plays out. Turn completes one of the draws. There's two draws on the flop, flush draw and straight draw, and now he goes big versus two players who called the flop, and there's a raise. I mean, he should have 6-7 or Jack-Jack 7-7 type of hand that blocks. And Canal Boom has the 6-7, and wow, he bet calls. Should have like, or Jacks with diamonds. Yeah, Jacks with diamonds and 6-7. That makes sense. So yeah, they had hands that make sense, but this is the more interesting hand. PLO decides to donk the flop four ways with queen blockers and queen high flush draw. I'm not a fan of that. If the board was rainbow, I would like more. We did it three ways. but there was one opponent who was neat. But here, the problem is that when the flush comes, it's a bit awkward hand with the queen high flush. I would much rather just check and check call than maybe turn the hand into a bluff on the turn river, depending on the action. Spinny calls with ace king, top pair and cutter. Wow. And then Adam calls with naked nut flush, which after the spinny call he can make the call, but still he needs implied odds. And this is the important. Remember, PLO bet slightly less than pot, spinny call. So let's get the actual sizing so we will get it right. He calls 144 with nut flush draw. That's going to hit 1 out of 5 times if no one else has flush draw. More than on average. So that would make slightly over $7. $7.20 or so. Which means when the flush comes, he needs over $1 as implied odds. If Spinny has a flush draw or PLO has a flush draw, then he's going to make it less likely he needs more implied odds. And there's high chance that they have flush draws too. Which means he probably needs $2.50 as implied odds at least. Even $3. And now he makes the flush. He has the stone cold nuts. Check. Check. And he checks. He doesn't bet the turn, and that's a huge mistake. He doesn't understand that to call the flop he needs implied odds, and now checking back the turn, he tries to trap people. Doesn't make sense. No one can have the nut flush blocker. So he's giving up the implied odds he has. So that's a horrible mistake. He should definitely bet here. And like, bet versus PLO at value. PLO would never fold queen high flush. He could, I don't know, wouldn't be surprised to see a check raise. Definitely bet the nut flush. Because then the river pairs, check, check. And he's afraid to bet. I think when they both check, he should go for like 1/3 of the pot. Try to get call from the flush that he missed on the turn. But checking back the turn is huge mistake from then Adam. And that's major mistake. But people do those. That's huge mistake. All right, that's 1 hour. Time goes fast. I hope you enjoyed. Too bad we didn't get as many interesting spots as I would like, but we got a few, and especially we got to discuss about the opponent's range, and we did some different decision processes that we did on the last video. Too bad we didn't get many paired boards or more monotone boards, which are often the ones where we need to adjust the strategy versus good players, because those are the boards and flops where we can be highly aggressive in our beginner strategy, but versus good players it backfires. So then like on monotone boards we want to bluff only when we have suitable blockers, and on paired boards, depending on the boards, we want to bluff when we have equity or blockers instead of just firing all the time. And then if opponent starts to float us on paired boards, or when we check, they know that okay, we would bet a lot of our hands. If we check we're weak, then we can add some try over pairs on our checking range and so on. So the pair boards is one where we can really change the strategy based on how good we are and how well we understand ranges and situations and different branches on the game tree, how our decisions affect future streets and so on. But that's 1 hour, can do everything in one video. I hope you enjoyed, and the next one is more about exploiting opponents. We get to the really fun part of PLO. Hope you enjoyed. Stay safe in the galaxy. Bye bye.